All right, in this chapter, we are going to modify the post-process volume. So I'm going to hit the G key in this box that we added earlier, the post-process volume. We can also type in the world outliner post, and we'll get the post-process volume. So this volume, we set two things. We set the infinite extent, which means that this is infinitely extended to our whole scene, not just bound by the physical bounds or volume of this box. And the other important thing we did was under exposure, we set the min and max brightness to 1. And we are able to adjust this exposure compensation here, but we're going to leave that at default at 1 because we kind of built our lighting around this locked exposure. Okay, so let's grab this and let's start from the top. So I'll roll up all of these so as it's not too confusing, and we'll go at it one by one. So under lens, mobile depth of field, we're going to ignore. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to come to bloom. We can check on the method and the intensity and the threshold. And now we can simply slide up the bloom intensity, and we'll see some of these highlights here are being bloomed. So if I bring that back down, you kind of see this. So if I crank this up all the way and then I start to adjust the threshold kind of tightens that or dials it back. So we've still got these hot spots, but we don't have that kind of glowing around it. So again, we can crank up that intensity and then we can dial it back with the threshold. And we'll see that a couple things are happening. We've got the highlights here that are starting to bloom, this mirror reflection that's blooming, and a little bit on this light here. So another thing we can do is we can adjust this light's emissive material. So if we select this light, we have this material here that is emissive. And we've got a setting here, flicker brightness, that we could probably adjust. So this is already what's called a master material. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to hit the magnifying glass. And there we have the M emissive. And this is the master. It looks like this M emissive flicker is the instance. Okay, so I'm going to reset that that light's intensity, or I'm sorry, that flicker brightness value. Actually, let's bring it back down to 1. Sorry, 0. 0.5. Okay, let's just leave it there for right now. And what I want to do is let's open up, double-click the static mesh to open up this mesh, and I'm going to replace the material in here. I'm going to replace the M emissive with the M emissive flicker. Okay, and that should change all of these lights easily. Right, so if I do that again, I'll grab the M emissive and I'll swap it out, and you'll see that these all turn to white. And then I'll grab the M emissive flicker, drag that in, and they all change to yellow. That's just a faster way to change all those materials. So now with this material, well, I have some parameters. So if I open this one up, this material will look different. And that's because this is a material instance. And we can change the color. So I'm going to change the color. I'm going to pull down the saturation a bit, bring it more maybe towards white. Maybe there's a little bit of color in there. But that'll do. But the thing that I want to do is I want to modify the flicker brightness. Because once I start to crank this up, this starts to bloom. Okay, so I'm going to bring it to a value of 3. Just type in 3. So we've got some kind of blooming here. Now let's go back to our post-process volume. Okay, and I'll reset the intensity and the threshold. So if I come back to the flicker brightness, I can now start to raise this up and really get this value to bloom. Okay, and that'll kind of stop the other areas from blooming because I really didn't want the highlights to bloom. I really just wanted these lights to bloom. So I'll bring this up to a value that I think looks good. I just want it to bloom a little bit. So let's just type in 10. Okay, so now back in the post-process volume, I can start to take the intensity and we can bring that up if we need to. I think it was fine where it was at. And if we want to tighten that threshold a bit, and we can control some of these highlights there with the threshold, this is an option. Really, I think I'm just going to leave the intensity and the threshold at default. The only other thing that I'd like to go over is the method. So this is the standard method, and this is fine. I think this looks good enough. But we have this convolution method, and this is much more taxing, but it looks a lot nicer. Okay, we get these nice star patterns, and I just like to point this out. So again, back in the intensity, we can start to crank this, and you'll see that we get these like colored star patterns wherever we've got this bloom. So let's set this back to 10. Got the bloom there, and then to get at the convolution settings, we need to expand the advanced and come down to convolution. So let's just check on all of these, and this doesn't turn on or off the feature. This just allows us access to modify its value. So convolution scale just scales the size of the star pattern. Okay, so I'll just leave that at default. Convolution center, just again, this is a texture of a star. The scale scales it up and down. The center will just move it left, right, up or down. We don't really need to do much with those. So we've got these boost, min, max, and multiply. So multiply is like the intensity. Okay. Then the boost max is like kind of like a threshold for the high end. So we can start to pull this down and say, hey, I don't want the really high values to bloom. So we can start to pull that down. And then the same for the min is the lower ends of that. So we can really just kind of dial this in as we like. Okay, so I'll undo that, or we could leave that where it was, I guess. Let's just leave it there, and then we can switch from convolution to standard. And this is the cheaper form of bloom, which I think looks pretty good. Okay, so that's it for bloom. Next is exposure. So we've already kind of gone through exposure. I can raise up my exposure, lower my exposure, but I'm really just going to leave that at default. The min and max, that's all going to be left at default, and I think we're good for exposure. Next is chromatic aberration. So this is an issue that occurs on lenses where the edges of the lens, as it gets out to the edge of the lens, the colors start to misalign. So if I crank this up all the way, we can see that around the edges, right, if I look in the center, the effect is less. If I looked over here, the effect is greater. But we've got this like red, green, and blue, this misalignment. So we can pull this in and out. Let's crank it up though, because for this next, the start offset, it's going to require, not require, but it's going to be much easier to see this start offset effect with it cranked up. So start offset is literally just going to go around the edge and kind of bring this, push this effect out toward the edge. So as I bring this up and down, we can see that like a kind of invisible line there of where it's distorting around the edges. So this could be a cool effect to have. Maybe you're using this in a scope's lens or something, where we're just distorting the sides. So we can, again, just dial this back. And I'd say dial it back to about here, maybe an inch around your scene, and then really dial back that intensity to, let's reset this completely. And I usually use a value of like 0.7. Okay, so it just kind of softens the edges a bit. Let's just do 0.6 and maybe push it towards the edge a little bit. And yeah, we've just got a nice little lens effect that helps with the with realism. So next is a dirt mask. We got a dirt mask texture. So I'm going to click over here, and we're going to make sure in view options we have show engine content turned on. Actually, let me search for this first. Search for dirt. Okay, nothing shows up. So when I turn on show engine content, we'll get a texture T screen dirt 02. So this is a picture, an image like this. And this is like lens, dust, dirt, and scratches. So for the dirt mask texture, we'll turn that, we'll use that texture. We've got dirt mask intensity. And if I bring this up, we can kind of start to see some of these little lens imperfections, or not lens imperfections, just rather dust and dirt on the lenses. So we have to kind of look, have some bloom in our scene too to see this. If I come back to the bloom and we brought the intensity down, we really wouldn't be able to see this. Okay, so the bloom really does kind of help this effect. If it's completely bloomed out, we can't really see it, but we had it kind of around there. And yeah, it's like as we get close to some of those bright bloom spots, we'll see the, in the darker areas, we'll see the lens dirt there. Now this setting stops at 8, but it can be cranked up. Let's type in 55. All right, so now it's kind of going to be kind of interface the whole time, which isn't that great, but we've also got a dirt mask tint. So if we wanted to tint that for whatever reason, we could do that as well. But let's leave this, I think, a value of 8 with our current bloom settings. It looks nice. We've got a little bit of that lens, dust and dirt. Maybe we'll bring that down to 4. You choose. Okay, so the next setting, camera. I'm not going to go over any of that. Lens flares, we can go over this. Typically the idea is don't turn them on. When I turn this on, it gets kind of crazy and distracting, but I'll just go through the effect. You'd really need to kind of tweak this a lot in order to use this to a point where it really wasn't distracting for the player. But it could be cool for a shot, right? If you're taking a screenshot or something and you want a bit of lens flare in there. So we can adjust the tint of the lens flares, the bokeh size, so the size of the of that shape there, we can scale it up and down, and the threshold. This kind of just we can clamp that and allow less things to less or more things to contribute to the lens flare, but I just turn it off. And I know that I said turning these on and off doesn't turn them on and off, but some things it does. But like the bloom, it doesn't. Right? If I turn this intensity up and I turn the method on and off, well, okay. Some of the settings are just on, and in order to turn them off, you need to check them on and bring them down to 0. Why is that? Okay. All right, let's just turn that off. Lens flare. All right, next is image effects. So we've got vignette. This is the darkening of the corner. Some old lenses or lenses have some vignetting. So again, this is another like camera kind of imperfection that you know, is used to help with photorealism. We've got grain intensity, so we can add some grain, some film grain, and then this grain jitter, which I don't notice any difference between 0.5 and 1. Maybe I'm not using this properly. I don't typically use this, but maybe we could add a little bit of grain, a little bit of film grain there. And again, it just helps with photorealism. But I'm going to turn off the grain. All right, depth of field. We can go over this. So focus distance, I'm going to set this to 100. The depth blur, okay, so we need to change the depth of field type. Where do I change that? Okay, so I haven't used this post-process depth of field in a very long time because I usually just deal with that through the cinematic camera. So I am just going to leave that alone. Okay, so we're out of the lens section. We can go to color grading. All right, so we've got white balance, temp, and tint. As I drag this up, my scene will get warmer. As I drag it down, my scene will get cooler. So we can just kind of tint the scene a bit to give it an overall cooler or warmer look. I'll reset this, and then tint, we're going to deal with the greens and the reds here. Okay, so we can adjust this stuff to get a certain look if we'd like all over our scene. I'm going to reset that, and maybe I'll just cool this off a little bit. All right, so global, we have global, saturation, contrast, gamma, gain, and offset controls. Really easily, I'm just going to check this on, and we're just going to deal with this slider. We can target single values. So here in the red, you see that I'm just kind of affecting the reds. And either saturating them or desaturating them. Same with the greens. and the blues. But let's set all of these back to 1. And we'll just use the global saturation, which will change them all. So we could bump up the saturation a tiny little bit if we wanted, or desaturate it a bit. Contrast, we'll check that on and expand it. And again, we can just adjust the contrast for the individual colors. But let's just adjust contrast overall. So we could push up the contrast and get a punchier look, or bring it down and get a more hazier look. We can adjust the gamma as well. And then I don't do too much gain or offset. But we can adjust those and get all different kinds of looks. Let's oversaturate it, white balance, cool it off, push it towards green or purple, and get a lot of different looks. All right, so I'm going to reset everything really except for the temperature. All right, and then we've got these same exact controls, but we can target just the shadows, just the midtones, or the highlights. So if we wanted to take the shadow, let's take the shadow contrast, and we can just kind of affect the shadows. Could also take the saturation in the shadows, although we're really not going to see too much of that. I guess we could see a little bit. Gamma in the shadows we should be able to see. We could try to crush the shadows, so the shadows get a lot darker. And again, we can do the same for the highlights and the midtones. All right, so let's pull up the global and the shadows, and that's going to do it for color grading. Mobile tone mapper, we can ignore. Film, we could tint it. This is just going to tint all the pixels on the screen. We can adjust the saturation and the contrast. Get all different kinds of looks, but I'll reset that. And we've got the rendering features section. I'm not going to go over too much in here. Ambient occlusion I'll go over, and probably and I'll go over some of them. So ambient occlusion, intensity, we can adjust here how we get this dark lining around where objects contact each other, and we can raise that up or lower it, and we can also adjust the radius of that. So to see this better, I'm going to go to lit, buffer visualizations, and ambient occlusion. Okay, so this is just showing what's called screen space ambient occlusion, which is what this ambient occlusion effect is. So if I turn this off, the whole screen is going to go white. Okay, if I crank it up, we can see how where things are close to each other, we're going to get this shadowing. As I pull this away, that shadowing goes away. As things get closer and make contact, we'll see that effect. Okay, so we've got intensity and radius. So I'll crank the intensity all the way up, and then I'll bring the radius down, and we can make that much more outlined if we like, for whatever reason, or the radius is just really that fall off between them. I typically don't do too much of this, and honestly, I oftentimes turn it off. But let's go back to lit, and here it is on, off. That's a little bit. I don't like to go too high because to me it feels a bit too gamey. But let's just leave it at its default 0.5. Okay, ray trace ambient occlusion. I'm not going over ray tracing. Global illumination, this indirect lighting color. So we can, again, just to do another like kind of color tint to what is the global illumination or the screen space global illumination. So if we wanted to kind of modify this and get a certain look, we can do so like so. I don't normally mess with that. Reflections, screen space reflections. Okay, so screen space reflections is one that I do adjust. And the screen space reflection is this reflection here where we can see, let's try to see, there we go. We can see the green smiley face, right? But if I look down, we'll see that that green smiley face disappears. Okay, because it's no longer on the screen, it can no longer generate a screen space reflection. So screen space reflection, we have intensity, so I could bring that down and turn off all screen space reflections. All right, we could put it back up. Quality, this just gives us a little better quality in the rougher areas. So we'll see like right here, if I reset that, it'll kind of go really shiny. And it's really just kind of an on or off, a 50, or it just kind of clicks there. So I like to kind of have it up a little bit. It's subtle, but I usually put it there. And then max roughness is like what roughness values do we want this to allow to affect. So max roughness, we say all the way up to rough, full roughness. But we can kind of just bring it down and say only the things with 0.01 roughness, which is just going to be our water here. Our water is incredibly reflective. So those screen space reflections are happening there, but 0.6, oops, 0.6 was a good trade-off there. So not a big difference between the settings that I change here, but I do usually change those. Okay, and that is it for post-process volume, or all the settings that I like to cover for the post-process volume. One last thing. We can have multiple post-process volumes. So I'm going to bring a volume over here. And I'm going to scale it so that it encompasses this area. Okay, I'm going to set the infinite extent. Let's just type it in. Infinite extent. I'm going to uncheck this. So now what this means is that whatever happens in this volume is bound to this volume. So in this volume now, I'm going to go and make some settings. I'll get in the volume and let's crank up the bloom. The exposure, I could overexpose it a little bit. And let's get into the color grading. And let's actually, scene color tint. This is what I kind of want to do. Let's check on the scene color tint. I'm going to set this to green. And as we enter and leave this volume, that post-process effect is going to take effect. Okay, so let's take saturation. We can oversaturate this. So, as we're hitting play, everything's kind of regular. We get over here and maybe there's like a poison something over here. So these things can be nested, meaning I can put another one, inside of another one. So let's duplicate this and I'll scale this one in. And I'll make this one just red. Okay, let's get in here. That's red. We'll go to green. We'll go to regular. And we can control the priority of these with the setting called sort priority. So if I type in sort or priority, okay, it's just called priority. They're all set to 0. So let's set this one. Priority of this volume. In this case of overlapping volumes, the one with the highest priority overrides the lower priority ones. Okay, so they're already kind of being sorted, and I think that's maybe due to the number or the order that they were created. But if we set this 1, 2, 3, this one has the highest priority. If I let's set the green one to 3. Whoops. Let's set it to 3, and let's set the red one to 2. So now when I go in the red one, nothing should happen because the green one is taking priority. So, yeah, at the moment, leaving them all at 0 worked just the way that I wanted them to. But now they don't seem to be working. So let's take that, sort priority 0, sort priority 0. Okay, so let's give this one a high priority again, so 3. And we can leave this one at 0. And then the global one will still take control. So again, here's regular. We've got the green, and then in here, the red. So we can do all those settings, and we can specify them or contain them with these post-process volumes, which is really awesome. All right, so that's going to do it for this chapter.